Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
What is happening?
He is falling ill. Help him!
March 18th, 1584. The Tsar of all Russia sits over a chessboard in the Kremlin. A flickering candle throws long shadows across his face, the face of Ivan the Terrible. His eyes, dark and feverish, fix on the board before him, a battlefield of ivory and ebony. Each piece, a symbol of power, war, and death. His opponent waits, silent. The Tsar's hand hovers above a pawn, trembling slightly. He breathes heavily, the sound rasping in the quiet chamber. A single move, a sudden collapse. The chess pieces scatter across the marble floor, and Russia's most feared ruler takes his final breath. Servants rush forward, attendants call his name, and within moments the corridors of the Kremlin erupt in confusion. The man who ruled with divine fury, who built an empire through terror, lies lifeless beside his own game. Officially, Ivan died of a stroke. That's what the records say, that age, stress, and years of illness finally claimed him. But one English diplomat present in the Kremlin that very day would later write a single, chilling word that changed everything. Strangled. One word, buried in a private journal, challenging 4 centuries of history. What really killed Ivan the Terrible? A stroke? Poison? Or a plot? Because when Soviet scientists opened Ivan's tomb in 1963, they found something no one expected. Mercury levels 10 times higher than any human could survive. And 3 days before his death, 2 men, Boris Godunov and Bogdan Belsky, stood beside him, both with power to gain, both with everything to lose if Ivan lived another day. If it was a stroke, history moves on. If it was poison, it's a cover-up centuries deep. But if it was murder, the assassination of Russia's first Tsar by his own inner circle, then his death was not the end of an era, it was the beginning of one. And that single quiet room inside the Kremlin, as thunder rolled over Moscow and the chessboard lay shattered on the floor, the empire of Ivan the Terrible fell silent, and the most enduring mystery in Russian history was born.
He was born in 1530 in the stone fortress of Kolomenskoye, a child destined to rule before he could even walk. When his father, Grand Prince Vasily III, died, Ivan was barely 3 years old. His mother ruled as regent, but her sudden and mysterious death left the boy surrounded by scheming nobles and power-hungry boyars. They fought over control of the throne, while the young Ivan watched from the shadows, learning early that power was both gift and curse. At 16, Ivan was crowned the first Tsar of all Russia, a title no ruler before him had dared to claim. He declared his power divine, chosen by God himself. In those early years, he was intelligent, visionary, even merciful. He reformed the legal code, created the first standing army, expanded Russia's borders, and dreamed of a centralized holy empire. But that dream soon darkened. In 1560, his beloved wife, Anastasia, died suddenly. Ivan's grief curdled into suspicion, and suspicion became rage. He believed the boyars had poisoned her, and in that moment, the Tsar who had sought to unite Russia began to tear it apart. He unleashed the Oprichnina, a reign of terror unlike anything Europe had seen. The Oprichniki, his black-clad secret police, rode through cities with severed dogs' heads dangling from their saddles, symbols of the Tsar's watchful vengeance. They tortured, burned, and executed anyone accused of treason. Whole towns were wiped out. Novgorod, once a thriving center of trade and culture, was drowned in blood when Ivan suspected its people of plotting rebellion. Tens of thousands perished at his command. Ivan became both ruler and executioner, priest and sinner. Every morning he would attend Mass, fall to his knees in repentance, and beg forgiveness for the souls he condemned. And by evening, he would sign fresh orders of torture and death. To his followers, he was God's chosen hammer. To his enemies, he was the devil in royal robes. His paranoia grew with his power. He trusted no one, not his council, not his generals, not even his family. He believed betrayal surrounded him. Those who dared to look him in the eye too long risked death. Servants trembled in his presence, and his court became a stage of fear, where one wrong word could end a life. Years of cruelty, war, and isolation began to consume him from within. The once fiery Tsar became frail and sickly. His spine fused from years of disease, his body twisted in pain. He reeked of the mercury ointments used to treat his sores, a slow, shining poison that seeped deeper into his flesh each day. And yet, even as his body failed, his faith burned brighter. He spent hours in prayer, fasting, reading scripture, and confessing sins that never ceased. He surrounded himself with priests, monks, and astrologers, desperate for divine answers. It was the astrologers who whispered to him that his death would come soon, that the stars themselves had marked his final day. Ivan listened. He began preparing for the end. He built his own coffin. He chose the robes he wished to die in. He planned his burial beside his murdered wife, as if seeking forgiveness beyond the grave. But even as he awaited death, he would not surrender control. He plotted his next marriage, one more attempt to secure an heir after killing the son who might have saved his dynasty. He still believed himself untouchable, that only God could decide when his time would come. And yet, on that stormy night in March of 1584, as thunder rolled over the Kremlin, Ivan's fate would no longer be written by the heavens, but by human hands. The final days of Ivan the Terrible unfold within the thick, silent walls of the Kremlin. The air in his private chamber is heavy, sweet with the smell of incense, bitter with the sharp sting of mercury ointments. His body is failing, but his mind refuses to rest. Shadows flicker across golden icons as he prays before them, whispering the same words again and again, seeking forgiveness, bargaining for time. Boris Godunov and Bogdan Belsky move quietly around him, the two men closest to his throne, trusted attendants, yet rivals beneath the surface. Godunov, shrewd and calculating, has long been the hidden power behind the crown. Belsky, younger and restless, clings to his place in the Tsar's shrinking circle, hoping loyalty will save him when others fall. Both know Ivan's moods can shift from laughter to execution in the space of a breath. The Tsar's skin has turned pale and waxen. His once fiery eyes now flicker between exhaustion and fury. Servants avoid his gaze, fearful that even pity might be mistaken for treason. At night, his screams echo through the corridors, shouts of rage, then whispers to unseen figures. He tells his attendants that demons come to mock him, that angels appear to warn him, that the spirits of the men he executed stand at the foot of his bed. But by morning, he composes himself. He summons his scribes and begins to dictate his final will, his voice quivering yet commanding. He orders his tomb to be finished beside his beloved Anastasia's and demands new prayers to be written for his soul. In the same breath, he speaks of marrying again to a young and beautiful noblewoman, his last attempt to produce another heir. Even on the edge of death, he plots to control life itself. Each day, his attendants notice his trembling hands grow worse. He cannot hold a goblet without spilling wine. He shifts restlessly, grasping for breath, his skin sweating and cold. At times, he bursts into laughter, manic and hollow, as if mocking death. Moments later, his face twists with terror. He begs his priests to drive away the evil spirits tormenting him. The chamber smells of holy oil and decay. Outside, the city is quiet. Snow falls softly over Moscow's towers, mooting the world beyond the Kremlin. Inside, the Tsar counts his heartbeats, feeling each one as both promise and threat. He knows the stars have spoken. His astrologers told him the day of reckoning draws near. On the night before his death, Ivan orders his chessboard to be brought to his chamber. He tells Belsky to play him a match and commands Godunov to witness it. They obey without question. The Tsar smiles faintly as he studies the pieces, the candlelight glinting off the ivory board. For a moment, he seems almost calm, almost human, a man clinging to routine in the face of the inevitable. The pieces move. Silence thickens.
Then came March 18th, and the game of chess that ended an empire. It is the evening of March 18th, 1584. The Tsar of all Russia sits hunched over a chessboard in his private chamber. The room is dim, the air thick with the scent of candle smoke and ointment. Across from him sits Bogdan Belsky, his young aide, careful with every move, careful with every word. Standing behind them, silent and unreadable, is Boris Godunov. He watches the match with the stillness of a man waiting for something inevitable. Ivan's fingers tremble as he touches a piece. His face is pale, his breathing shallow, yet his eyes burn with that same fierce light that has terrified men for decades. He leans forward, studying the board, and for a moment the room feels frozen in time. He mutters something no one fully hears, a prayer or perhaps an order to himself, and reaches forward to move his king. His hand stops halfway, his lips part slightly, then his body stiffens, his eyes widen, and he collapses backward in his chair. The chessboard flips, pieces scatter across the marble floor, the sound sharp and final. The king tumbles beneath the table. Bogdan Belsky leaps to his feet, calling the Tsar's name. Godunov steps forward, placing a hand on Ivan's chest. The room erupts into confusion, servants rushing, guards frozen in shock. For a few seconds, no one knows if the Tsar is alive or dead. Outside the chamber, an English diplomat named Jerome Horsey stands among the commotion. He has spent months in the Kremlin, negotiating trade for the Muscovy Company. That night, he will later write, he saw panic, shouting, and the hurried sealing of doors. He will write of seeing the Tsar's body carried away in silence, and in his private journal, he will record one word that history cannot explain: strangled. Horsey's words are clear and deliberate. The Tsar fell backward and was strangled. No hesitation, no ambiguity. A man of diplomacy, not rumor. He had nothing to gain by inventing a murder, yet his account stands alone, contradicted by every Russian record that followed. The official chronicles declared that Ivan suffered a stroke, apoplexy they called it, a sudden collapse of the body, the will of God. The physicians were summoned, they said, but too late. No mention of a struggle, no mention of strangulation, no mention of anyone touching the Tsar's throat. But Horsey was there. He wrote what he saw, or what he believed he saw, and the Russian court made sure that his version never appeared in their own history. Imagine the scene in those final seconds, a frail ruler gasping for air, his attendants bending over him, hands gripping his shoulders, perhaps his throat. Was it mercy? An attempt to steady him? To help him breathe? Or was it the moment his life was deliberately ended? The flicker of the candlelight, the muffled panic of the servants, and the heavy silence that followed, all of it buried beneath centuries of rewritten chronicles. In that chamber, only 3 men knew what truly happened: Ivan, Godunov, and Belsky. One died, the other 2 lived to tell the story their way.
and when the doors of that room finally opened, the Tsar of Russia was dead. His face, they said, was peaceful, but his eyes remained half open, as if still watching the men who stood above him when his final breath escaped.
4 centuries apart, 2 scenes mirror each other, one in a candlelit Kremlin chamber, the other beneath the cold fluorescent light of a Soviet lab. In both, the same question lingers. Did Ivan the Terrible die by the hand of fate, or by the hands of men? 2 men stood closest to Ivan the Terrible in his final days, Boris Godunov and Bogdan Belsky. Both were loyal in appearance, obedient in action, and indispensable to a ruler who trusted no one. Yet beneath the veil of service lay ambition, calculation, and fear. Boris Godunov was no ordinary noble. Intelligent, pragmatic, and ruthlessly composed, he had mastered the art of survival in a court where a whisper could mean death. He came from a lesser boyar family, rising not through blood, but through intellect and patience. By the 1880s, he had become the silent architect of power within the Kremlin, controlling audiences with the Tsar, overseeing the court, managing foreign affairs. Few decisions were made without his influence. To those who knew him, Boris was courteous, measured, and endlessly adaptable. To his rivals, he was a shadow, moving quietly but always closer to the throne. He understood Ivan's paranoia and fed it just enough to remain useful, but never enough to appear dangerous. Still, Ivan's moods were unpredictable, and even Godunov knew how quickly favor could turn to fury. Bogdan Belsky, on the other hand, was a man of presence rather than intellect. As Ivan's personal aide, he shared the Tsar's private moments, his games, his prayers, his illnesses. He was the one who handed him his staff, brought him his wine, and prepared his chamber. But service to Ivan was both privilege and peril. Belsky had seen others in his position executed without warning. He knew that loyalty meant nothing if the Tsar's suspicion shifted toward him. By the winter of 1584, both men were walking on a knife's edge. Ivan had begun to speak of changes, plans to exile several nobles, to reorganize his court, to strip some men of power. Whispers reached Godunov that his name was among those marked for dismissal. Belsky, too, was rumored to have lost the Tsar's full trust. The 2 men who stood nearest the throne suddenly stood nearest to ruin. Ivan's plan to remarry and perhaps produce another heir threatened to destroy the political balance they had built. If the Tsar lived another week, he could easily undo everything. And if a new heir was born, Boris Godunov's influence would vanish overnight. For men who had risen through cunning, there was no room for uncertainty. They understood Ivan's weakness, his trembling hands, his failing heart, his dependence on medicine and attendants. They had access to his food, his drink, his chamber. They knew every routine, every secret. If anyone could orchestrate the perfect death and make it look natural, it was them. When Ivan collapsed during the chess game, both were there. When his body was lifted, both were near enough to touch him. And when he was pronounced dead, both were the first to take control of the room, sealing it off, commanding silence, and managing who was allowed to enter. Within hours, Boris Godunov was already issuing orders in the Tsar's name. Within days, he had secured power over the new ruler, the weak and childlike Fyodor, Ivan's surviving son. No trial, no inquiry, no questions asked. The death of the Tsar was accepted as fate, and the man most likely to benefit stood calmly at the center of it all. When the Tsar fell, Godunov rose.
The body of Ivan the Terrible told a story long before the autopsy did. His erratic moods, sudden violence, and physical decay had already hinted at something unnatural eating away at him from within. Mercury, the quicksilver of the Renaissance, was both medicine and murder in equal measure. In small doses, it was believed to purge impurities and cure diseases like syphilis. In large doses,
It corroded the mind, blackened the gums, and drove its victims to madness. Ivan's chronic ailments were well documented: tremors in his hands, uncontrollable outbursts of rage, skin lesions that refused to heal, hair falling out in clumps. His servants described him as alternately calm and furious, weeping and laughing in the same breath. Physicians of his time called it divine punishment. Modern scientists call it mercury poisoning. The symptoms align too precisely to ignore. Tremors, the shaking sickness, paranoia and hallucinations, a poisoned mind twisting reality, the strange reddish skin tone described in court records, his teeth blackening, his slow, staggering walk in the final years of his reign. Mercury poisoning does not kill swiftly, it destroys by degrees. Over years, it erodes the nervous system, leaving behind a shell of what once was. By the time of his death, Ivan's bones and tissues carried mercury levels 10 times higher than any known fatal dose. That is not an accident of medicine. That is exposure far beyond what treatment alone could explain. And yet, there are counter-arguments. Historians who warn against the lure of certainty. They argue that Ivan's physicians used mercury ointments liberally, rubbing them into his skin daily to treat chronic sores. His chambers were said to reek of it. Over time, even without malice, such exposure could have been deadly. Perhaps the Tsar was not poisoned by his enemies, but by his doctors. Still, others note the pattern of royal deaths where medicine became a weapon. Kings, emperors, popes, many were treated to death. In England, mercury was used to purify the blood of monarchs. In France, it was prescribed for noble ailments. Too much care, too much cure, and a convenient death followed. So the question lingers like vapor from an alchemist's flask. Was Ivan's slow decay the tragic result of misguided medicine, or a deliberate act of long-term murder disguised as care? Either way, the poison had done its work. Long before the chessboard, long before the final move, Ivan the Terrible was already dying, not by sword, not by stroke, but by the unseen hand of quicksilver seeping into his veins.
In 1581, in a fit of rage, Ivan had killed his own son, the heir apparent, striking the lineage of his dynasty down with his own hand. The Tsar who built Russia through conquest and terror had simultaneously sown the seeds of its undoing. His surviving son, Fyodor, weak and ineffectual, could not hold the empire together. Within years, Russia descended into the time of troubles, a period of impostors, famine, rebellion, and chaos. The irony is haunting. Ivan's blood built an empire, yet his hand destroyed its continuity. One moment of rage, one act of violence, and the dynasty he fought to establish began its collapse. The stars had foretold death, but history recorded the consequences of his choices. The empire survived, but his line faltered. 4 centuries later, we are left with 3 possible truths. Ivan the Terrible may have been strangled, as Jerome Horsey claimed, a sudden, deliberate act of assassination. He may have been poisoned over time, his body ravaged by mercury and arsenic, whether by careless treatment or calculated murder. Or perhaps his death was natural, the stroke, the collapse, the final act of a frail body overburdened by decades of power and paranoia. What truth lies buried beneath centuries of silence? Was Russia's first Tsar a victim of his own medicine or of his closest allies? In medieval Russia, truth was more dangerous than power, and sometimes power silenced truth forever.